time. Anybody else out there recording? Okay, thank you for that. Well, we have two items on the agenda. We have the presentation from the Greenfield Tree Committee, which we are looking forward to, and then an informal discussion about the major developmental review recommendations in town as we consider the ordinance and modifications we may or may not make. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes from last week's public hearing. Did anybody have any comments on those? George?
Thanks, Charles. A few things. Emily, you have those in front of you to make notes on?
No, but I'm typing everything you say.
Okay. So in on page 2, the top paragraph, I believe there's an error. It says public comment opened at 5:49, no public comment. The next sentence, I think it's just an error. It says the public hearing was closed for public comment at 5:50, whereas just in the middle of the page, it points out the public meeting was closed at 6:19. So it just seems like an error. Do you see where I'm talking about?
I do, and I agree with you because that was part of I listened to the comment, and it was definitely after 6.
Thank you. On the last paragraph in that section, the last
Still on
sentence.
Page 2?
Say again?
Still on page 2, sorry.
Correct, yes. So still during the public hearing discussion, the last sentence says Tecumseh responded that he believes the master plan does support the proposed zoning map amendment. I want to offer the reasoning I offered at that time. So the words I would want to add to that sentence, just extend it, in conjunction with the proposed amendment to the RC zone, balancing protection of farmland with encouragement of economic development. I know I made essentially that statement at the time, so.
Yeah, I remember that.
Was that clear enough, Emily, or read it again?
No, I got it. So let me just read it back to you. So you want to add your reasoning regarding your response, and the reasoning is, quote, in conjunction with the proposed amendment to the RC zoning, balancing the protection of farmland with the encouragement of economic development.
Yeah, it would just be zone, not zoning.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And the other thing is, since you did, Charles, as mentioned, moved Mark up, I believe the last 2 votes, the motion on the action item and the motion to adjourn, should be 4-0-0, not 3-0-0.
Okay. Yep.
That's it.
All right. Thank you, George. I don't have anything to add. Mark isn't here.
I would make a motion to approve with those adjustments or edits.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous, so no roll call. Amy, we're not really going to be voting on anything tonight, so it's probably not necessary to elevate you or anything other than posterity. So are you happy just residing as your alternate status?
Yes, I can remain unelevated.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right. So moving on in our agenda, we are now going to get a presentation by the Greenfield Tree Committee on the results of their updated tree inventory they conducted during the summer of 2020. would one of you like control of the screen? Do you have it for the presentation, or?
Yeah, if I could share my screen, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I think you might just be able to grab it. I don't know if I have to give you permission or not. Why don't you see, Margo, if you can?
It's
Yeah,
Mary.
Mary. Yeah.
Mary's going to run it.
Okay, Mary.
There we go.
Okay. Great. So thank you for making time in your agenda this evening for us. I'm Mary Chickwin, and John Bottomley and Margo are here with the tree committee as well. And as Chuck said, we're going to be sharing findings from this past year's 2020 tree inventory that our committee conducted. And can people see this little thing here? Try to get it out of the way. Everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to give you just a little context on why we conducted the inventory, why it's important, what we found, and then what the next steps might be. And then hopefully, if you have any questions or feedback, that would be great as well. So Greenfield Tree Committee, for anyone who doesn't know, is a nonprofit volunteer group. And we've been focusing for a long time on planting trees in public spaces, providing education to the public, and doing a lot of fundraising. The past couple of years, we've really been working closely with the tree warden and the DPW, even more so than usual, to meet the goals of the current U.S. Forest Service tree grant that the city of Greenfield received in 2018. And that entails planting 800 public trees and conducting a bunch of outreach and education. And kind of an unexpected outcome of this grant is that Greenfield Tree Committee is starting a tree nursery. As a matter of fact, we've already broken ground at Just Roots. And the trees that we grow there, which will be most primarily native trees, will be planted back out in the city of Greenfield in public spaces. So we're really excited about that. And there'll be more to come on that in the future. This is totally a review for everybody, I'm sure, who's here. But I just wanted to ground us in why trees are so essential for Greenfield, and especially in light of climate change. They are, an integral part of our green infrastructure and provide things like reducing stormwater runoff and lowering the cost of cooling in summer, and particularly important, sequestering and storing carbon. And then, of course, they offer a whole raft of other community benefits, social, economic, and ecological benefits. So I think like I said, everyone here knows that, but it always bears repeating. So that's kind of where we were grounded as we started to think about doing this inventory. We also wanted to do the inventory to help us plan for planting in the future, to really understand what the species diversity was of our public street trees, and to help us prioritize where we should put maintenance. And when I'm using the word we, and because we have such a great working relationship with DPW, I think of we as all of us. Also to seek more funding, whether that be the city or the Greenfield Tree Committee itself. And then also we really wanted to address some trends that we saw from a couple of earlier inventories. So in the bottom left here, in 2014, Franklin Regional Council of Governments conducted an inventory of trees, public street trees, about 600 or 750 trees in all. And they found that just over half of those trees are Norway maples, which maybe you know are invasive species. Those same trees, most of those trees are in decline. They were planted after Dutch elm disease came in and wiped out all the beautiful old elm trees in town. So even though 50 years doesn't sound old, and it certainly isn't old for a tree that's out growing in the woods, it can be quite old for a tree that is planted along a tree belt. So we found that almost 3/4 of those trees were starting to look like they were in decline. In 2016, the FERCOG did another inventory, just a quick windshield inventory, to see what of those trees that were inventoried in 2014 were still standing. And in fact, 108 of those trees had been removed just in those 2 short years, and only 34 had been planted during that same time. So that was really kind of an alarm bell that was ringing for us. And so at that time, we knew that we had to start intensifying our fundraising and our tree planting. So how we did the inventory, we essentially used the same project area that the FERCog had used in 2014, shown in this map on the top left-hand corner. We ID'd and mapped and measured each tree. So we measured the trunk circumference, the height, and a bunch of other data points about the trees. We also did a visual assessment. None of us are arborists, so we didn't do an in-depth assessment, but essentially what we were looking for was any obvious issues that might mean that those trees needed maintenance by DPW, either critical situations or high situations. And all that information, like I said, we mapped and then we captured it with ArcGIS collectors. So that info is now available in a map, and we'll be sharing that with you later on. So what we found.
Right. So of the total trees inventoried in 2020, we inventoried approximately 1,200. 220 had been removed since 2014. So we actually, we inventoried where there wasn't a tree anymore. That was the 220. And we actually looked at 979 within that area. So it's not all of Greenfield by any means, but it's the densest part. So maples make up 44% of all the trees inventoried. It's not surprising in New England, we're right near Vermont. Maples are very abundant, but a lot of them are non-native Norway maples, and that's not what we want. So the breakdown between native and non-native trees, 60% of the trees now are native. So that's going in the right direction. The non-native shade trees, 35%, and small trees, 5%. Next. These are the locations of all those trees we inventoried, and I just want to do a shout out to Mary because she was there for every single one of those dots. It was a labor of love.
I was gonna say, Mary, I'm pretty sure that I came up and said hi to you guys while you were doing it on my street. That was nice.
Oh, cool. What street, Emily?
Kenwood. I handed out Clarkdale apples.
I remember.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Right. You're right, Emily. Okay.
I'm the community. Yeah.
Great. Well, so anyway, the blues are the Norway maples, and you can see that they were used very heavily in the newer developments in these neighborhoods. But they're the ones that are aging out and need to be replaced. But this map also gives a good indication of many streets that just don't have street trees. And we hope to work with the DPW to improve that condition. And it's not, well, anyway, yeah, we'll get into the details later. But so we have, of the 781 shade trees, 32% are invasive Norway maples. Maples, as a rule, make up 52% of the shade trees. Small trees include serviceberry and yellowwood, many of which were planted very recently, because we have to, when there's wires overhead, we have to plant a small tree. Next, yeah. So the trunk size, I'm going to go through these sort of the data. It's a little bit dry, and really we want to focus on sort of policy implications for you or with you. Trunk diameter, most of the trees are very small. Less than 10% of these trees had trunks greater than 30 inches, and 50% were less than 10 inches wide. So it's not an old stock of trees, street trees. And in terms of the trunk diameter increase since the last inventory, you can see that the Norway maples actually didn't grow as fast because probably most of them are fairly mature, and many of the younger trees grew pretty rapidly, especially elms and ash. Then we're really interested in canopy, because canopy is shade and canopy is the coverage that the streets get. And so we're doing a little bit more focus on that now. Canopy height, only 2% were greater than 60 feet tall, which is pretty disappointing. And 35% of the shade trees have a canopy height of 20 feet or less. Then the width, which is also really important, 35% of the shade trees are 20 feet wide or less, and only 5% are truly, large with a greater than 60-foot canopy. And
excuse me, Margot.
Yeah.
If folks have questions along the way, do you mind if they ask them, or should we just wait till the end?
No. I think.
Okay.
Please ask while you're.
Okay, great. I think George might have had a question.
Yeah, thanks. I had a couple. I just didn't want to get too far from the data you were presenting, Margot. Thank you. Just one question is the discrepancy between the Norway maple percentage in the 2014 inventory. It was just over half, as you mentioned, and then it was half again that as much in the 2020. It was only 25% versus 50%. Can you give an explanation of that? Seems like a discrepancy.
They're dying off.
Okay.
A lot of them were planted when the elms died, as Mary said, and they're a fast-growing non-native tree that, I don't know. Mary, what's the average age?
That's right. A lot of them are just being cut down, removed because they've been deteriorating. Yep.
So they've been a high percentage of the ones removed.
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
And John will get into the removals in a couple more slides, a little more specifically.
Okay.
Yep.
And the other question I had is the DBH. Is the diameter, is that DBH?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Great. Where were we? Oh, okay. So the height, 60% of the trees are 20 feet or less, at least among the shade trees. And while that's sort of not very tall in terms of shade trees for streets, it does show there's a lot of potential there that they're going to keep growing and get better.
John, how about the bad news?
All right. So as you can see from this graph, a great many trees have been cut down in the last several years. Actually, 30% of the total trees in the inventoried area. And as we were just talking about, this represents a huge loss of canopy cover because most of those were large Norway maples, which are our largest street tree in general. It also kind of represents this discrepancy of where we have so many old trees. We have only young and old. So as these come down, it creates a real discrepancy that we hope in the future to have more even continuous planting going on to avoid this type of situation. Unfortunately, we expect this trend of cutting down to continue based on our findings. Again, just because the trees are deteriorating with age. And it's going to take many years to get that canopy cover back. There is some good news in that a bunch of our native species, the honey locust, oaks, sycamore, and green ash are actually doing quite well on the tree belts and have had a small percentage that are failing. You can see from the removal locations, it's pretty much affecting every neighborhood in the city. People really began to notice the rapid loss of trees when essentially entire streets were cleared or large sections were cleared, leaving little or no shaded areas. And trees do create a sense of place, especially here in New England. And I think the loss of trees in these neighborhoods, in conjunction with people being more aware of climate change, has really created a more intense interest and advocacy for planting trees in Greenfield. All right, this is my favorite one, the good news. Thanks to our many partners, the U.S. Forest Service, DCR, Franklin Land Trust, all our volunteers, and probably most important, a receptive and proactive DPW, 388 trees were planted since 2014. if you look on the graph of species, most of these species planted are native, which is actually intentional to benefit, since these native trees benefit our ecosystems. We also plant a variety of species so that we don't have just one or two dominant species. The perfect example was Dutch elm's disease, which going way back kind of created some of this problem, because when they all died, which was a major part of our street trees, they were replaced with almost all Norway maples. So this time around, we're trying to really diversify that so we can prevent or avoid a catastrophe. If a disease targets one particular species, we'll still have species left. I wanted to bring up one point too about the species. The tree committee, in conjunction with the tree warden, created a guide which lists appropriate tree species as part of the tree ordinance, which was approved by the city council, I think in 2016.
Yes.
And also you can see that currently of the trees, 65% are shade trees. In general, our goal has been 80% shade trees. We are planting the smaller trees under power lines also, but there's just so much more benefit, reducing the heat island effect, stormwater retention, that we're really focusing mostly on these shade trees. Tree planting locations, again, you can see it's widespread throughout the area. The stars represent volunteer planting, which was led by the tree committee, or organized by the tree committee. Their community plantings, of which were driven by community member requests. And we found that these events really build community. They include a lot of families. They're really good events. You also notice on the map, there's a little bit more density because we usually do a smaller concentrated area, usually kind of lining both sides of the trees or the street.
We have a plantings planned for Elm Terrace this spring, and that'll fill in an area that we really haven't covered very well. Yeah.
Tree condition, this pretty much highlights what we've been talking about, that most of the critical high maintenance needs are Norway maples. So unfortunately, we're gonna be losing a lot of those the next few years. And also the data we collected will help us keep track of pruning needs, which will hopefully help these trees. If we can keep track of pruning them in the first 10 years, will help their structure and provide a better maintenance in the future. Main Street data is very encouraging overall. The trees are sort of moderate aged, very healthy. The species diversity is actually pretty good. Really, our main concern here is ash, because we're worried with the current spread of the emerald ash borer, which has been reported as close as Amherst, I think. I can't remember, but I think that's right. If it gets close and takes these trees out, that would be really a significant impact on our downtown. You can see the green dots represent ash, which are in clusters along Main Street. So we may at some point want to look at treating those.
Oops, did you have anything else on?
I think that's it.
Okay. Now we'll take just a little breath because we're switching gears altogether. So that was the on the ground inventory that we did. Sort of going hand in hand with that is a different tool. It's called iTree Canopy, and this is a way you can assess overall tree coverage in a neighborhood in a way that a public street tree inventory never could, because we're in those kinds of inventories, we're not looking at private trees at all. So the way this works is that iTree Canopy uses aerial photos, and you can select an area. In this case, I've selected the area that is bounded by Main Street, Federal, Pleasant, and Davis. And then the tool basically generates random points, and each time it drops a point, you identify whether it is on a tree or it's on a not tree, meaning roofs or hardscapes or whatever. So in this area that's right nearby town and near a commercial area, there's only 16% tree cover in this 16-acre or so neighborhood. If we go just one neighborhood north from here, so here's Pleasant again, and Federal, and Davis, and then on the north, this block is bounded by Garfield, and this is about a 21-acre neighborhood. You can see just by all these green dots that the tree cover in that neighborhood is twice as much as that previous slide that we looked at, or almost 1/3 of tree cover. And just as a kind of reference point, many more urban cities and smaller size cities like ours aim for 40% tree coverage, or 40% canopy coverage. And one more example, so our goal is to conduct this kind of analysis with iTree canopy for that whole inventory area that we showed you early on. But these are just a few samples. We're not that far into the analysis quite yet. But here's a third sample, and it's really instructive. Here's Sanderson Street here, High Street, Beacon, and then again Federal Street, and you can just see the masses of orange dots. And this area has only 7% canopy coverage. This is something that we've known. I mean, you can kind of drive around it and go, oh, there's not very many trees here, but getting a bird's eye view in this kind of analysis really helps you to understand just what the situation is. And I think even though there's a lot of, there's a huge hospital here, obviously there's parking areas and a ball field, I do still think there's a lot of opportunity and locations for trees in this area. So like I said, we're going to continue using this tool to help us in the future, kind of hand in hand with the other inventory that we did to continue to prioritize places to plant public trees. And just speaking of planting public trees, this is just a quick map to show you as part of that tree grant that we've mentioned, these are the priority areas that DPW, the tree warden, and actually we had a public comments, a public information session a couple years ago in 2018. And so this year we'll be finishing up in this phase 1 area. This is up toward the high school, and then we'll be concentrating on this phase 2 area, et cetera. And just kind of as a side note, during the time when this wonderful tree grant came the way of Greenfield, Greenfield Tree Committee had set a goal a couple of years earlier of planting 1,000 trees in a decade. And as it turns out, we're about halfway there. I kind of doubt whether or not we would be so far along without that grant, but we're just so pleased that we feel like the trend is really turning around with tree planting. To temper all that good news just a little bit, I wanted to quickly mention a few challenges, a few themes that run through the work of planting trees. Watering trees the first couple of years is just so difficult, just to have enough DPW summer staff, enough, the tree committee, we have a will, but we don't have the way, we don't have the equipment or trucks to do this kind of watering. So that's really essential. We're still trying to scratch our heads and figure that one out. Availability of good quality native trees. We have a couple decent nurseries nearby, but it is sometimes hard to find the trees that we want. So we're hoping that our own nursery will take care of that in a few years. Of course, capacity, both for, having enough budget for DPW to have that essential summertime staff, and for Greenfield Tree Committee to continue to do the kind of work we've been doing is really important. And then finally, we added this because we thought this was the right place to just mention that we think there's a real potential for somehow requiring more tree planting as part of site plan requirements for commercial and industrial areas. We're not sure exactly how that would work, but we wanted to kind of put that out there, and probably there's not time tonight to talk about it, but certainly it would be nice to have a conversation in the future about that. And finally, you'll be happy to know that I didn't bring along the 10-page action plan. But there's actually some really fun and cool stuff that we want to do over the next few years, and it will continue to focus on planting public street trees, educating and supporting homeowners. We would like to really, we can't put money toward planting trees on private property, but we can certainly support homeowners in learning how to do that for themselves. We started off with climate change. Climate change wraps into everything that we think about and we do and how we prioritize the areas that we're planting. And like I already mentioned, just building capacity. So you are all invited to join the tree committee. Or anyone you know who loves trees. You don't have to have any particular talents. We have a great group of people and we're very active and we're always welcoming new people. So with that, I will leave you with this photo from our Lunt Field tree planting this past year. And just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity and ask if anyone has any other questions or comments.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks all. Yeah, so this was the maiden voyage for your presentation, and you're going to be taking the show on the road, so to speak.
Probably, yeah. We've talked about doing a couple more. We're not sure exactly. Maybe through the Sustainable Greenfield Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Okay.
But if you have ideas, we certainly want to hear it.
This is like a totally. I think that on your first street map, you called High Street Federal Street.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
So I just thought I'd point that out.
Oh, look at that.
Wait. Oh, right.
Oh,
Right.
sorry about that. That was my
No,
bad.
that's okay.
Eagle
I know, I just wanted
eyes.
to.
Yes. I'm glad you noticed.
Well, I always try to figure out. I love maps and plans. I always try to get my stuff oriented. I was saying, wait, what am I missing here?
No wonder you couldn't get oriented. I apologize. Sorry about that.
Yeah. You know, one thing that would be interesting is on that tree canopy map you were showing of the Sanderson Street area would be. Because I look at something like that, I'm saying, so what's the strategy for planting trees there? And maybe if you came up with like what your vision would be for that area if you were going to plant trees and where would they go? Because there's a neat opportunity like to define sort of streets and parking edges and where the ball field is just to the east of the middle school, and how would you plant trees around that? I think it might be kind of neat to see a conceptual sort of a tree planting plan of how you would envision that sort of developing, so people can sort of say, this is what it is and this is what it could be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you foresee, Chuck, that you might get to a place where you can require shading of parking?
Well, we do require there's I forget exactly what the metrics are, but there are requirements to provide trees for some number of parking spaces. I'm not sure what that number is, but yeah.
Oh, that's good, because I only saw in the site plan review regulations, I only saw screening required.
I think there's something I could look.
That'd be great.
I think there's something about requiring trees in parking areas. George, is that ringing any bells with you?
It does, and I think you're correct. We're talking about parking areas,
Right.
so it's specifically, but I don't have the details at the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm trying to landscaping and screening requirements, page 76.
Well, we can follow up with you on this later.
Okay, no, I was just curious.
Well, and then the other thing was that sometimes there's planting required in the site plan review, and Mary's noticed that it sometimes doesn't get done.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable calling anyone out on that.
Yeah. No, but I mean, whose responsibility is it to see that the plantings called for in the site plan review?
Well, ultimately, it's an enforcement issue with the building inspector, I think.
Yeah.
The building commissioner.
But I think Margot is talking about whether it's being addressed during the review.
No,
I think both.
both. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's both.
Okay.
Right.
Well-
I think sometimes the actual site plan doesn't get planted, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that was just a concern, especially in certain critical areas. If you're talking downtown or even spots of Federal Street, where if there's not attention paid to it, it could really easily just become that sort of concrete cityscape. And before you know it, there's not even, like, we can't even do anything because there's no place to plant trees. If they've removed those spots or it hasn't been planned for, you just hate to see like trees treated as a landscape element that's eliminated if people can't afford it, especially in these key areas, or it involves parking lots.
Yeah, I was just looking. I was looking in the ordinance. I thought maybe Greenfield doesn't have it. I know Northampton has a requirement to plant trees in parking lots.
And Amherst doesn't let you cut trees down. Or for every tree you cut down, you have to plant 2 more or something like that.
Well, yeah, Northampton has a thing where it's done by diameter. You have to replace 70% of the diameter of the tree you cut down. So if you cut down, like a 60-inch diameter oak tree, you have to replace it with something like 40 inches of cumulative diameter of smaller trees.
Well, maybe we
Chuck,
could.
it sounds like we need you on the tree committee.
I would,
George?
yeah, I would say, Charles, that it's good to consider ways we might integrate the the ordinance that we do have, but also to be particularly mindful. And I think it's good to call things out if they're getting missed. We should be particularly mindful of things that are already on the books that we're supposed to be doing. So it's a good reminder and prompt, I think.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
No, it's good. You go ahead, George.
Well, I had a number of questions, but I didn't know if you wanted to finish up on that topic.
No, I didn't. But before you go that, John, did you just want to add something in quickly?
I was just going to say that with this new tree ordinance, it's helpful in that I feel like we have this guide for street trees too. So we've provided species that we recommend for planting in the city, which would be helpful to be followed too. So that it's not necessarily random, but something the city has planned and has a guide for what to plant or what's acceptable.
That's a nice idea.
I will mention, I just want to mention in case anybody races out after this meeting to find that tree list. When Paul Raskowitz, the tree warden, left, he had approved that new tree list and it had made its way to, I think, not Eric, but Alan Twarog, who was going to add it into something, and it was supposed to make it on the website. And long and short of it is it's not there yet. So that's something I need to follow up on.
George, you have some questions?
Yeah, I'll as an intro, I'll say I'm not planning to join the tree committee now. I do greatly appreciate and admire the work you guys are doing. I think it's fantastic.
Thanks,
And I think the positive collaboration with the DPW is essential and fantastic as well. But I will say the first committee I joined when I moved here in 2002 was the tree committee, which at that time was an official town committee. And it was long ago enough that I was approved to join by the select board.
Wow.
So it was just shortly before we moved to a mayoral form of government. So I got some experience during that time. That's why I learned DPH and some other things. But one question, when you talked about the canopy cover required, I was before the meeting, I was trying to dig through the master plan. I think our target in our master plan is 40%. Do any of you know if that's
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you. And there was one map you showed a few pages back. It says the title is "Planting More Trees," and it has 3 zones. And I didn't quite get how the zones matched up with the text.
Oh, that is a good point. That's because it does not match up with the text.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So on the, yeah, this made perfect sense to me because I made the map, right? But the numbered areas are the tree planting phases.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank
these
you.
numbered areas, I will get rid of the numbers and then that won't be
Oh, I
confusing
see
anymore.
down at the bottom, numbered areas equals, I get it now. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, it didn't really pop out though.
I was gonna say,
Gotcha.
George, no offense, but I understood it how it is. So Mary, I'm not sure if removing numbers is
Well,
Very
it's
good.
easy to do.
no.
Offense not taken. Thank you. I wonder when you talk about the pruning, and I totally agree that timely pruning is essential to maintaining tree health. Who's doing the pruning? Because that can involve some risk with depending on how high up you're going to do the pruning. So is that all DPW, or is there some volunteer pruning going on?
Yeah, so the Greenfield Tree Committee has been doing some tree maintenance for a number of years now. We do some of the easy to reach branches on Main Street to try to keep the branches pruned up. And now we have this whole new initiative that John has been working pretty hard on too, to make sure that we're pruning the new trees as soon as they get in the ground. And we try to do that maintenance of the young trees for the first several years because that's so essential. We do have liability insurance through our umbrella organization, the Connecticut River Conservancy. And we try not to do, although I don't know if the photo of John standing on a ladder is in this, maybe I should take that out. I was just going to say we try not to stand on a ladder, but that's a lie. So we don't use any power equipment.
Right.
So as soon as we get to that point, that's when DPW needs to be doing the maintenance, and they do.
Thank you. And a specific, rather than the trees being a hazard to the trees on Main Street is the occasional sad but actual vandalism that happens with smaller
Absolutely.
trees. And I wondered, is there it just seems, it's different than just seeing a tree that's damaged by nature. It's so discouraging to see that. And I wondered if there's a system to try to quickly prune those damaged areas away, just so it's just the impact, psychological impact it has to see that.
I mean, I feel like when I was, before COVID, I was spending a lot more time walking up and down Main Street, so I would notice those things and try to get to them. But I don't think there's no formal system that I know of.
Okay.
Just, if anybody notices them, it'd be great if they could, call DPW or let the Greenfield Tree Committee know.
Gotcha. And what's the status of the use of, I think it's called engineered soils? That's in the ordinance, right? As the latest ordinance, something about using, is that the right word?
Okay, it just flew right out of my mind. That's one word that you can use, yes. And I don't think that's in the ordinance. Maybe it is.
Okay.
It's in the master plan. Structured soils. There we go. It came back to me.
What is it again?
Structured soils.
Okay, thank you.
And it's so that, yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, that's a particular type of soil and stone mixture that helps, you can excavate out a tree belt and replace the compacted soil with a growing medium that's provides a better environment for tree roots to be able to spread out. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously from some of the photos you showed, but also our experience, the clash of tree branches and telephone wires is a constant issue. Is there any? I know it's been discussed about burying wires and stuff like that. Is there any discussion of that kind of thing that's happening? It's a pretty expensive transformation, but I know
that was in the low impact development regulations.
Thank you. Yes, I thought I was remembering reference to that. So okay.
And it is a recommendation, but it's so cost prohibitive that I don't know.
Sure.
And would happen.
My last thing is more of a pet peeve. There's been a fad that's done by homeowners, but also by landscaping companies of these what's referred to as mulch volcanoes, or
Yeah.
telephone polling of trees, where you're supposed to have the root flare exposed for a healthy tree, and they'll pile up the mulch so that it looks like a telephone pole going in there, which is
Yeah.
not good for the long-term health of the tree. Is there any way to educate, or it's just so strange because it's just a fad? It's just bad for the tree.
I don't know. I mean, I live near a small condo development, and every year I tell them, please don't let your landscapers add any more mulch to the volcano mulches, because you can see the effects, which is that all the tree roots are now growing on the surface. You can see them popping up out of the lawn because they're not, the roots just grow toward the surface when you do that. It's just really bad for the tree, and creates a great environment for nasty stuff to grow along the trunk of the tree where it's covered with all that moist mulch.
Right.
So
And
I don't know.
using more mulch, you'd save money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this particular development has enough mulch to mulch, I don't know, a football field, seriously. So
I would add one thing about mulching. We have gone around and done some ourselves, so, and are trying to do that as part of our committee on these new trees, because we have such a horrible problem with the weed whackers.
Oh yeah,
It's just unbelievable, because they girdle those trees pretty quickly by getting so close to the trunk that the weed whacker goes all the way around damages the tree around the trunk. And that's, the DPW has complained about that forever too. And I wish there was some way to educate all the maintenance companies around town too, to train their summer help. So we found the easiest way for us is just to try it, to put some mulch around there to keep them away from the trunk for a while.
Like a mulch donut, you don't come right up to the
Yes,
right up to the
right,
trunk of the
right,
tree.
that's right.
Like a crater to the volcano, not
Right. Yeah.
That's all I had. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you.
Thanks, George. All right. Any other comments from folks on the board? Mark, I saw you were a late arrival.
Yeah. Hey, Charles. Thanks. Hey, everybody. I just was wondering, Mary, you had referenced a full report, and I didn't know if that was available on the town website or if you could forward us a copy of the report. I feel like the presentation itself is great, and even without you walking us through it, it's a great standalone document. But frankly, if you have more, I'd love to read it.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll be pushing
Great.
that out in the next couple weeks.
Good Laura.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you again for making time for us.
Sure. Any final thoughts from your corner, Amy? Not to put you on the spot, just wondering, give you a chance. All right. Well, so good. So what's the next stop for you with this, do you think? Where do you go from here?
For tree committee?
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about spring, and I'm busily running back and forth to Just Roots, where our new tree nursery is going to be located. So we've got a few of our tree committee members who are, I don't know, casual carpenters, thankfully. So they're building a shed. We're having fencing installed, and we'll be getting delivery of tree whips and small trees to plant out in the nursery this year. We'll be starting with 40 trees and going from there. So that's kind of where my head is at. I don't know about John or Margot.
Well, we're doing this planting at Elm Terrace, and that's where my head is at. And we would welcome volunteers if you want to come, and because the folks that live there feel like it's a little too much heavy lifting to plant trees, so we really need a few more volunteers than normal.
Where is that posted? Where the planting dates?
It's on our website, our Facebook page. We'll be handing out. We'll make it more clear. There'll be publicity about it.
GreenfieldTreeCommittee.org is our website,
Okay.
and then we're on Facebook too.
And they actually, the housing authority is going to dig the holes, so you don't have to actually work that hard. You just put the tree.
Yeah, the tree in.
But
George?
it is very satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if I know in the past I've heard about folks that are involved with the sheriff's department or something like that, and this is a very
Yeah.
this is a very uplifting activity to participate in, and I didn't know if that's something that might be. I just think the jail's right across the street. So
I know, and they
maybe
have
commit
planted
and-
some trees. Yeah, that's a good idea. We should contact the sheriff and see.
George, that's a great question. And I know from having volunteered a few years ago at Just Roots that they have had a long time relationship with the jail.
Yes, that's right.
I'm not sure what the status of that program is with COVID, but I have been thinking kind of in the back of my mind that that might be a nice fit for some folks who are, you know, approaching release from jail to get
Yep.
some training at the tree nursery, but also just out, you know, on the streets as well. I mean, we have a lot of tasks that we're doing all the time, so yeah.
Right,
I
and the
also-
inmates could actually do this as like their community service. I'm pretty sure it qualifies under statute as community service. So that could be a really great opportunity.
One thing
Yeah.
I will mention is a couple years ago, I had inquired with them for some activity. I don't recall what it is now, and they were actually overbooked. They had so many requests for various activities. So, but it's a great idea. Yeah.
Hmm.
Good.
Okay. Well,
All
thanks
right,
again.
well, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
to see
you.
you all. Keep up
Good
your
to see you
good work.
too. Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Charles,
Yes.
I have a request. Before we
Okay.
segue to the next item, I know we would still have quorum, but I was wondering if we could take a 5-minute break. I've got a bit of a family crisis, and Laura needs to check her email. And if
Yep.
that would be okay, 'cause I'm interested in participating in the discussion.
Well, should we reconvene at, how much time do you need? 10 minutes?
10 would be okay. I don't want to inconvenience anybody else too much, but I can try for less.
How do people feel about we reconvene at 7:05?
Perfect. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. See you in a
Okay.
bit.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Hello there. Hello. Well, we're taking a brief 10-minute adjournment or whatever you call it. No, I haven't. But maybe we Hello.
I'm like happy to give him a couple extra minutes. Oh, here he is. Never
Looks like
mind.
he's coming back. Mark, when did you sneak in?
I don't know, like 6:05.
Oh, okay. So you got to hear most of the tree presentation.
I wouldn't call it sneaking. I just didn't kick down the door in my usual Mark Maloney fashion.
Right, right. Well, I guess that counts as a as you were present at the meeting.
Yeah, no, I was there like within their first couple of slides. It was not very long at all.
Yeah. Well, I like to start a punctual meeting, so I usually I'll give people a minute. Then 6:01, 6:02, I say, I'm starting the meeting if I have a quorum.
Of course.
Okay, George, you're back. Everything's okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a long distance elder care issue, and
Okay.
Laura was able to get a email back and a response. So it was very helpful.
Okay.
It's
So-
not a safety concern, just a
Okay.
coordinating some extra care kind of thing.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
kind of impressive. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Sure. Just to sort of continue the conversation with the tree committee, I did go into the ordinance here. Of course, I got a million things up. I have no idea what the right one is. Is it this one? So are people seeing the ordinance?
Okay.
People seeing the bylaw, the ordinance here for landscaping?
Yep.
Yes.
Number D.
So yeah, so I mean, we don't have to go over it all in depth, but for parking areas, it's pretty detailed in terms of spacing of trees, diameter, bushes, percentage of planting areas within a parking lot, depending how big it is. Greater than 20 parking spaces shall have 10% planted area. So I mean, that's something we don't always really necessarily focus in on site plan review, but we do have the ordinance here to lean on, and so we should use it, and so we do have some good guidelines in here for parking lots.
Thanks for checking that.
Sure.
So I think
So-
that like the Applebee's thing that we did a couple of weeks ago, we should make sure that they following this with the tree guideline, although right there are a lot of trees, but like that's one example where we could follow up with the tree.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're only making like 4 spaces, and they're eliminating 2 spaces. But yeah, I mean, most of these things have to do with. I'm sorry, I'm kind of wandering here. Anyway, I just think it's a good thing to sort of be mindful of as we go through site plan review with, like with parking. I know that we're going to be having the new library site plan coming before us within the next month, and so that'll be that's like right downtown, and there is a sizable amount of parking there, and I'm on the committee, so I don't want to throw them under the tree bus. But we should be looking at this is an opportunity for a significant site plan review right downtown, and it'd be good to sort of look at it in the context of a good exercise. Look at it in the context of what our ordinance says in terms of required trees for parking areas.
It would be good too if the tree committee is aware of that coming up for review. They might have some input.
Yeah, maybe I'll just send Margot or somebody an email with this sort of excerpted out here. So major developmental review. I was looking at Norman's notes here, and I was coming across these sort of archaic looking guidelines and regulations, dated 14 years ago. And I was like, where did you get those? And I was trying to find them, and they weren't in the ordinance, and they weren't online. But I think that sort of a new updated version of these exists in our guide to development, which is this thing. This is a really great document, really helpful. I don't refer to it enough, but I'm going to start referring to it more often, I think, because it's a great roadmap. George?
Do we all receive that?
I don't remember receiving it. I saw Eric. I found it on the town website, and Eric said, "Yeah, it's there," or he might have emailed it to me once because I was saying, "What are the procedures for something?" But it's really great because it has all the procedures laid out for these various permits that we look at: signs, site plan review, MDR, sign permits, special permits, variances, subdivision. I mean, it's all sort of here in a nice kind of a condensed, easy to digest format, and then you can refer to the ordinance, I think, for more detailed requirements. But for the major developmental review, which is page 14 here. This is what we say right now. It's sort of out. It gives us the purpose, and then it sort of outlines the thresholds here that trigger mass developmental review, who the reviewing authorities are, the process. So I think it's a good place to start. It's kind of like the gateway into the conversation of where are we now in a certain way.
Right. So Charles, you, I know we had initiated this conversation independent of Al Norman's input or initiative,
right.
And but you were referencing the marked up document he sent. That is the current version, right? Because it has the latest things that were changed on March of 2019, and it eliminated B5 rather, which was
right.
So that is, you said there was some archaic stuff, but that's the current ordinance.
Oh no, I'm not talking about the zoning ordinance itself. I'm talking about this. He also included this. These are like the rules and regulations for major developmental review. So it's this document here that I wasn't really able to find anywhere.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And then I didn't know where it came from. And then he has another one here for special permits. Again, dating back 23 years almost to 2008. So it led me on the quest to sort of find those, like, where are those documents? Those don't look familiar to me. And then and that led me to this document here, which is the guide to permitting.
You guys, for what it's worth, like the binder that Eric gave me in the spring has all of this stuff. So it might be that it's to your advantage to just ask Eric to kind of get you an updated binder.
I think it's in mine too. I just hadn't looked for it.
I didn't see it in mine. Well, is it in yours, Emily?
So I'm a really tardy planning board member, and I haven't picked mine up yet.
Okay. All right. Oh.
Yeah, no, I have this. I have this. I don't know that it's in the. I see the MDR rules and regs. I don't know that it's in the index though, or the table of contents.
It's not in the table of contents, and it should
Right.
be online. I mean, that document should be available online. You should
Sure.
be able to very easily go to the Planning and Development website and find that document.
That's true.
I'll talk to Eric about that. Because this is all I was able to find, and it may be there. I just didn't. Maybe I didn't, look hard enough. So I thought Al's presentation was helpful. I think that he had a couple of those salient points about changing may to shall. Those are like important little changes that we can think about. But George, you voiced the initial sort of interest in looking at this again, and so what are some of your thoughts that about how we might want to go about this and things that are of interest to you and looking at again?
Well, thanks. I can identify the problem. I'm not sure of the solution. The problem was that there was not any kind of clear proposal brought forward through the normal deliberative process of, hey, maybe the MDR is too restrictive, or let's take a look at this. Let's see how it compares to other communities, similar ordinances and that kind of thing. This was something that was done in a hurry by a couple of people, neither of whom were planners. And then the decision-making body didn't seem to spend much time on deliberating the nuances and details of this. And even Rudy, one of the engineers of the changes, said they would just kind of, I can't remember her exact words, but
No, I remember that.
It was acknowledged not to be something that it was just kind of, spur of the moment or something. Just seemed like good changes. There was no deliberative process. So the overall thing seems like it was a unfortunate rush to do something for other purposes, and it didn't seem like it had planning integrity to it. And the majority of board members at the time spent a long time offering input about this and voted 4-1 against that change, and that was not persuaded. I think a couple counselors referenced the planning board input and weren't persuaded by it, but I think, again, it was in the context of the panic about the library funding,
Right.
which is not a good context for doing long-term planning.
No, I remember getting phone calls from folks saying, if you recommend against these changes, that's the end of the library.
Sure.
And so that was sort of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That this was happening under, and you're right. It wasn't good planning or bad planning. It was no planning.
Right. So, part of me wants to just say, we should kind of just turn the clock back and go back to where it was, or say, okay, we don't think it should have been changed, if that's what we think. The board at the time expressed that, but we could say, okay, we're suggesting do a deliberative process, look at the MDR, see were there problems with where it was at, look for input. We've already got a bit from Mr. Norman for consideration. So I think it would be a mistake to just say, oh, that was a mistake, let's go back to the way it was. I think we should try to initiate a process of deliberation and gathering input about how was it then as compared to how it is now, and what are the implications, and are there other ways? So how could it be? What would be the sweet spot of how it should be?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the exact process would be to do that, but that would be, I guess, my my idea of it generally.
Yeah, I mean, so the question that comes to my mind is like, what's the data that we have to to sort of analyze, and that would be what are the major developmental review permits that have come before the town in the last 5-10 years, maybe? What's the history of these, and look specifically at those at those projects, analyze their sort of impact, and historically on the neighborhoods that they moved into, and how did the existing MDR regulations at the time do at creating a good development? And we have a lot of historical information to look at. We've had no major developmental reviews come before the board since this ordinance changed.
Well, they wouldn't come before our board.
Well, they haven't come before the town. They'd come before us for a recommendation.
That's true. Yeah.
And I don't think that anything's and they would come before us if they.
Well, also the guidelines, what would become a major development review, were drastically changed.
Right, and still that the bar was lowered. Right, the bar was lowered.
So less things. Some things might have come in that would have been.
Yeah, but I can't think of anything. Can you what's been like the last big project we reviewed was the center school out on Route 5. That didn't fall under the category of major developmental review.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And the B5 was I'm sure we can find it somewhere, but that was totally eliminated, and that was about redevelopment. And so, has there been any of that? I honestly don't know. I mean, obviously, there's been a difficult period for development or redevelopment of any sort in the last year, but yeah, I'm not sure. So,
well, I mean, 1824 Burniston Road could wind up being an existing, a significant redevelopment of an existing facility that may or may not fall into MDR. I don't know.
Where is this?
The property at the end of where the map, where we just did the map change.
The Pop Place.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to look at the history of the permits that have been pulled. Maybe.
Well, Eric had given us a compilation of, hadn't he, at some point? Maybe that was when this was all happening, back in 2 years ago, when this change was made. I believe we had requested of Eric, how many? Yeah, I remember that was part of what we commented on.
Yeah,
I got to dig up my notes from that time, but how many MDRs were done and how many were denied, or that kind of thing.
right.
So
There's not a lot of them.
No. But when there are, they're major.
Right. They're major developments. Yeah. And again, I think it's I think getting the planning board reviewing back in there is important. I think that getting the existing additions to existing developments back in is really important. I mean, we don't have to analyze any metrics for those, and I think getting the car trips back is important too, perhaps.
I don't know, as I said, what the process would be by which we do this. I mean, obviously, we could make a proposal for a change to the zoning ordinance, and it could include some of those components. It could be the going back to what it was before 2 years ago. It could be including some of the things Mr. Norman suggested. So I'm just not sure how we're going to proceed with this.
Right.
I appreciate it coming on the table to be discussed.
But what about the French King overlay? That was rescinded at the same time, or is drastically reduced to become effectually null.
Well, that's would be a whole other topic which isn't on our agenda. That's all I'd say to that.
Yeah. Right. Say that for another day.
So I'm interested in hearing from other board members what they're, because I know I did initiate this.
Sorry, I was taking notes. I don't think Eric's gonna want, I currently have 4 Word pages of notes. Surprise! Anyways, I agree with George or Charles, that I think we should find a way to bring back in more discussion in front of the planning board. But other than that, I don't really have anything to say.
Well, I have a clarifying question. I guess when we talk about deliberative process, like, to what extent do you actually want like community conversation and focus on this beyond just the public hearing to propose changes? I mean, George, are you or is anybody envisioning something more along the lines of around like some forums or presentations that actually outline like the fundamental purpose of major development reviews, how it's gone in Greenfield over the past 20 years, tie it in with the master plan? It's just like, this is just one of the updates and critical analysis that we should be doing. So like, when you say a deliberative process, are you talking about We5, or are you talking about something that has greater like community engagement than just the public hearing process?
Great questions. I think that especially given the context of this, it would be important to do some education and some transparency. And I'm trying to envision it as if the change didn't happen. Someone has come forward and said, you know, we should think about our MDR. Is it really serving the community well, or should we make some changes? So I'm trying to picture it. We're kind of turning back the clock. The library is not in play. You know, just this has independently come up as a question. Should there be some changes? Is it unreasonable? Is it overly restrictive? Because that was the underlying presumption of these changes that were accepted by the council. And to look at that, and that might involve looking at some comparisons of other communities, similar ordinances. Yeah, so I think I don't know as far as having additional venues in which to discuss this, but I think certainly doing some research so it's just not appearing like a knee-jerk reaction of, hey, you know, that shouldn't have been done, and hey, why can't we review these anymore, or something
Right,
like
right.
and you know, so try to demonstrate some deliberativeness, and then obviously by making a proposal that would trigger a broader conversation. So that's so I think, you know, some of what Charles was doing, looking back at the specifics of ones we've had previously, and looking at other communities as comparison, could say, oh, ours was out of whack, or now it looks out of whack, or something like that, you know. So
Right.
it seems like we're not safeguarding things enough with our current ordinance, because that would be the concern.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to, you know, if you just think about the number of sites around town that, you know, that are zoned in such a way that they could even, you know, that a major developmental review type of project could even, you know, come forward in that area. there's very limited opportunity for major developmental growth in this town right now, I feel. And you know, I wonder if there's a way to think about the major developmental review in a way that that actually encourages more good development. You know, is that it's like how can we divide, how can we, you know, create a major developmental review ordinance that actually is appealing to developers, with the quid pro quo being that there are certain sort of design standards and community sort of investment that has to be made in order to get permits that are required. And so try to reframe the question. Wait, it's not restrictive. It's expansive in terms of what it offers.
Can you say an example of what you mean, Charles?
What would I? Okay, like you know, we might let you create a D level intersection from what was once a C level intersection if you plant 200 trees over here. That kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So people will be in the shade while they're waiting for the light to turn.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe there's potential trade-offs. You know, you give a little here and you get a lot over there.
Interesting. You know, I think it would be helpful to look at what have been the major development reviews in the last 20 years or whatever. I mean, for example, the Walgreens on Federal Street was a major development review, and you wouldn't, from looking at what that had been before, you wouldn't say, oh, those houses there will become a major development review, but someone came, you know, purchased those lots, combined them, and came up with a project that did trigger that. So, you know, there could be plenty of other places that, you know, as they appear now, wouldn't fit that bill, but, you know, someone could come along with a proposal. So
yeah, no, that's true. Wasn't the hotel down at Howard Johnson's, that was MDR, wasn't it?
Yep.
He had the whole traffic study and
yep,
impact on the community. I guess that's
so
the
I think
last one I remember.
Looking at those examples, you know, reviewing that list that Eric had given us at that time, and he could, you know, give us a little more, flesh that out a little bit, perhaps, just to refresh or educate our understanding of where it has been, and so we can picture how it's worked, and maybe getting some other. I'd love to look at some other community comparables, just to get bearings on was ours before or now, you know, line up in some way. I just think that would be, you know, with some comparable communities. So that would be, obviously it's easy for me to talk about this now because Eric's not here, but, you know, I'm giving him work to do.
Let's give Eric work. Well, I mean, you know, all these communities have, you know, they have ordinances. They're really easy to find. I mean, my comparables are always Amherst and Northampton because I work in Amherst and have a lot of projects in Northampton. So I'm familiar with those towns and they're nearby.
And I think I'd be interested in Eric's filter too about that, because he may say, well, those are nearby, but they're not really, you know, they're hard to compare or something like that. He might have another idea of parameters to look at as far as population or socioeconomic factors or something.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So that's, Mark, in answer to your question, that's kind of how I'm picturing getting some grounding in our community's history with this, comparables of other communities, and then going through this, you know, kind of piece by piece and seeing if we can come up with a proposal, again, framing it as if someone had said in late 2018, the MTR should be reviewed again. We're not sure if it's working right, and so that's my idea.
For what it's worth, I mean, I think what you're proposing sounds fantastic, George, and I wasn't necessarily like advocating for larger community outreach. I just was wanting to be sure that I understood what you were,
Yep.
whose deliberation you were referring to. But I do feel like it would be nice to have a little bit more local history, education perspective from Eric, perhaps even see if like Peggy from the COG or somebody else could just kind of give us a little bit more grounding in it. I feared that what we were going to do is basically just start working with Al's comments as a strike through, and that was the process, which is a completely valid thing to do. But having seen how that process plays out before, I think to kind of have a little bit more thorough work underneath our belts makes sense. So I support what you're saying here. I think looking at kind of what we've done in the past, whatever time frame people think makes sense, 10 years, 20 years. I'd be interested to hear what Eric has to say in terms of comparable communities and just kind of start going from there. That to me, I feel like I would be able to contribute better with a little bit more of a foundation as opposed to just reacting to somebody else's proposed edits.
Yeah, and I think it's really clear when we're talking about this. I mean, obviously, we didn't have a public hearing when Al offered his information. He was afforded by the chair, and that can happen. But I think it's really important, given the history here in this community, that it's clear that was not what triggered our conversation.
Yeah. Do you remember that Conservation Commission stuff from a few years back that just kind of like blew up and the town went nuts with the Conservation Commission and the Appointments and Ordinance Committee?
I'm not sure.
No, it was. We worked heavily off of recommended edits from somebody who wasn't even on the committee, and then the town just went nuts.
Yes, okay.
Nuts. And we had not done our own work, and that we were the body that was supposed to be doing it, not just taking the recommendations from citizens with opinions and blah 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 blah. I
totally hear you. The reason why I invited Al to come listen is I think he probably saw that it was on the agenda, and so he reached out to me and said and I said, yeah, anybody can come speak in a planning board meeting. The chair can recognize anybody who wants to talk in the public, and so I did it in that spirit, and I think that I think that his input was interesting. I would put his notes aside and not even necessarily and sort of think of this as a from the ground up sort of reboot or reimagining based on our own research, our own thoughts and informed opinions about it.
Yeah, I think it can be seen as a continuation of that long planning board meeting just prior to the vote. I think it was the day or so before when we had a very long meeting and a lot of people present. And
it's a packed room.
Yeah, and it was a 4-1 vote. And so I see this as a continuation of that meeting or that process. And I was, like I said, harboring that process and that result ever since then, and have been thinking for a while of bringing it back. And I was the one who initiated, and the board agreed, let's put it on the agenda. It was totally independent of Al Norman, had nothing to do with him. So I think it's important in our public presentation of this that's clear, not to be defensive, Bob, but just say this is coming from us.
To be clear, I'm in no way like I thought Al's participation in the last meeting and his feedback was fantastic. I think there was a lot of food for thought there. I'm not trying to slam the process or the decisions anybody made around that at all. It was hugely helpful. I just would like more information.
Right.
So I feel really good about the process that we're kind of laying out here. But there was no criticism implied of the process thus far.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed okay to me. I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think it is in keeping, Charles, with your chairpersonship. You've been quite flexible about giving the okay for people to speak, even if it's not a public hearing. That's the chair's discretion, and you've exercised it consistently.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, as long as there's not a lot of people there, so it can't get out of hand. I see no problem with letting people speak
Yep.
every now and then.
Yep.
It's going to help us out. So next steps on this would be maybe to get some information from Eric about the history again, remind us of that, and look at some neighboring town comparable MDR regulations. So even if he can just, point us to the town, and we can research the bylaws. It's a lot of work to go in and find all this stuff. Or we could each take a town and research it and bring it back and report to the rest of the board.
Where's Ginny when we need her?
I know. She was so good at that stuff.
On the assessments, she's put her brilliant investigative brain on. But I just find myself wondering what Linda Smith would say. I would love to hear her input as well.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Yeah, she certainly sat on the board for a long, long time, saw a lot of projects come through, as has the mayor.
Right.
I guess we could always invite speakers to come and lecture us, enlighten us. So that's kind of what we did with kind of what I did with Al in a certain way.
Yeah.
So shall we continue this conversation for the next meeting, maybe, and get a little more information from Eric, and then maybe at our next meeting we could be prepared to sort of outline a general strategy for how we want to move forward with this.
I think that sounds reasonable, Charles.
Okay. I'll give Eric a call and just sort of chat with
My
him.
notes will tell him what you're thinking.
Oh, okay. I usually call Eric once or twice a week anyway, and just sort of.
I'm just being a butt. Don't mind me.
Okay. Yeah, I always have to learn somebody's style, That's good, Emily. Thank you.
All right, so motion to adjourn.
Any board and staff reports first?
Well, I just wondered, do we know about the next another person coming onto the board? There was someone who had applied, or
Nathaniel Hussey is applied. I don't know him. You know him, Amy. It seems like. Do you know Nathaniel?
Well, he gave a presentation when we had the planning board meeting at the high school. I think it was during the MDR. Do you remember? I do. He was in school and he presented a map.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Are we talking like high school or college?
College.
Grad school. No, grad school.
Yeah.
Not even college.
Yeah.
We were at the high school.
Okay.
Right. So I'm not sure what the status of his application to join the board is.
Is it possible for you to find that out?
Yeah, I can find out. I think I called the mayor's office a few weeks ago about it, and they were going to look into it, but I didn't hear anything more.
I feel like we discuss this every time we meet.
Yeah, we do.
I think every 2 weeks we have this. First, we refresh ourselves on who Natty is. Then we affirm that indeed Roxanne has not moved any of this forward.
Yeah.
Then we affirm that we should look into that.
and I make the appropriate phone calls. I do.
All right.
But I still can't remember.
It took me approaching the mayor at the farmer's market to get her letter to the clerk's office. So
okay, that's good to know.
But now at the farmer's market too, so he can do that.
That is why I bring it. That is why I bring it up. That sometimes there's so many things going on. Taking the initiative can sometimes move the process along. So
yeah,
that's my experience.
And Mark, you are now officially a full member, right?
Not that I've heard. No.
So you're still an alternate?
No one's been in communication with me from the mayor's office in the past half year, with the exception of Caitlin. I think like wanting to know if I had ever been sworn in as an alternate. But that's
All right,
like
all right. But you've made the application to be a full member, right? You've made the appeal.
Yeah, months back. And at that point, Mayor Wiedegardner had said, like, I think because it was actually, we had initially put me in, and then Emily's name was already in the hopper. And so Roxanne was like, I'm so sorry. Hadn't known. And I just moved somebody's name forward, and it's in the process. And that was Emily.
News makes me feel
So
great.
that was, no, whatever. It's, hey, whatever.
Right.
So for
Then
Mayor, she was
Jim
just
said-
like, so I'll elevate you next. The next time,
Right.
there's no shame in being an alternate, yada, yada, yada. I was like, no, this isn't about, there's nobody's ashamed. They just, every single time we meet, we have to elevate me. Therefore, why not
Right.
just get this
Yeah.
done?
Right.
So
And
she
Jim
was
stepped
aware.
down.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to email the mayor directly. Well, you
Right.
know, for her staff, but I'm happy to send an email to the mayor's office. Just kind of providing that nudge of like, my understanding is there's currently an opening, still willing and able to move from an alternate to a voting member status. Await your reply.
Yeah. They may even think you already are a full voting member.
And
So, okay.
I would say, Charles, if you can ask about that as well, it can't hurt.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
so we can at some point
Yeah.
stop having this conversation.
Right.
Well, I mean, not that it's not nice. What I'll do though, Charles, I'll CC you in my communication to the mayor. I'll CC you and Eric so that the board leadership and the planning staff are just kind of in the loop.
Okay, great. Any other board and staff, anythings? All right, now I'll accept that. Now we can take that motion to adjourn.
Now,
Motion-
second.
Any further discussion on the matter?
Good night.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, no roll call.
And thank you again for your accommodation mid-meeting. Appreciate it.